cold gust of air, unlike any breeze she had ever felt, brushed across Psyche's skin. No longer trembling with fear as she had on her first days entering the divine realm filled with bizarre trials, now, a determined fire shone in her eyes. The fragile, delicate appearance of the mortal girl seemed to have given way to a powerful aura, an iron will that even the gods on Mount Olympus would have to be wary of. Having gone through so much hardship, from sorting seeds under the watchful eyes of diligent ants, to collecting the wool of fierce golden sheep, and even venturing down to the underworld to steal Persephone's beauty, Psyche was no longer the naive, vulnerable girl she once was. Each challenge was a brick, building a new Psyche, a heroine ready for the final battle, the battle that would decide the fate of her love with Eros. Beside her, Eros, the god of love with golden wings, couldn't hide the pride in his eyes. He looked at Psyche, not just with the eyes of a lover, but also with the deep admiration for a warrior. He knew the path ahead would still be arduous, even life-threatening, but he believed in the hidden strength, in the courage that Psyche had proven time and time again. "Are you ready, my Psyche?" Eros's warm voice gently touched her fluttering heart. Psyche turned to him, tightly grasping Eros's hand. Her hand, though still bearing some calluses from the trials, now exuded a strange energy, a strength she herself had not expected. "More ready than ever," she replied, her voice firm without a hint of hesitation. "We've come too far to stop now, haven't we?" Eros smiled, a radiant smile like the dawn dispelling the darkness. He squeezed her hand gently, and then a golden light enveloped them both. It was Eros's divine power, something he was willing to share with the girl he loved, so that she could face the final challenges. Psyche felt a warm energy spreading throughout her body, a new, miraculous strength that made her feel more confident and powerful than ever before. However, even in this serious moment, Eros's mischievous nature did not disappear. He winked at Psyche, his tone teasing. "But remember, no matter how strong you become, you're still my mortal girl. Don't you ever forget that." Psyche chuckled, a light laugh that dispelled some of the tension. "I remember, my clumsy god, but this time I'll be the one to carry the team. You can just relax and be my support." Eros pretended to be hurt, clutching his chest and exclaiming, "Oh, my weak heart, rejected by my beloved right before a life-or-death battle. It's truly adorable," Psyche interrupted, placing a light but loving kiss on his lips. "Now let's go, my Cupid." They held hands, heading forward, where darkness was gradually enveloping, concealing the final challenges that awaited them. A bizarre, chaotic scene filled with a cacophony of sounds appeared before Psyche and Eros. It was neither the gloomy garden of the underworld, nor the magnificent Mount Olympus. Instead, the final challenge was a distorted, haunting version of a bustling city Psyche once knew a circumflex Eros, Saigon, but transformed into a massive slum, a tangled maze of dark alleys, dilapidated buildings, and piles of foul-smelling garbage. The sky above was covered by a thick, dull gray fog, making it difficult for sunlight to penetrate, creating an atmosphere that was both gloomy and suffocating. The blaring of car horns, desperate shouts, and the roar of engines mingled with the whistling of wind through the cracks of the crumbling buildings, forming a terrifying symphony that sowed unease and anxiety in people's hearts. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, littered with broken pieces, shattered bottles, and all sorts of trash. A pungent stench filled the air, causing Psyche to wrinkle her nose. This was not the Saigon she remembered, the city of brightly lit streets, fragrant cafes, and friendly smiles. This place was a dark version where life seemed to be struggling to survive. This is the final challenge?" Psyche asked softly, her voice tinged with surprise. She had imagined magnificent places, grand arenas, but this scene had a cruel, terrifying starkness. Eros squeezed her hand, his eyes fixed on the dark alleys ahead. "That's right. This is the Saigon version of the underworld, a place where the fears, the torments, the resentments of this world gather." "But why here?" Psyche wondered, confused. "Perhaps," Eros speculated, "because this is where you once lived, where you understand the hidden corners, the difficulties. The challenge lies not only in the external dangers, but also in the memories, the emotions that this place evokes." Psyche was silent, trying to sense the atmosphere around her. She realized that no matter how strange the scene was, there was still something familiar, a breath of Saigon hidden deep within this dilapidated shell. Perhaps that was the real challenge. Suddenly, a dark shadow darted across the alley ahead, followed by a startled cry. Psyche and Eros jumped, looking warily in that direction. They sensed danger lurking in every nook and cranny, in every shadow. Difficult challenges, far beyond their imagination, awaited them ahead. "We must be careful," Eros whispered, tightening his grip on Psyche's hand. "This place is unlike any we've been to. The spirits here are no longer bound by ordinary rules. They can attack at any time." Psyche nodded, swallowing hard. Fear was still there, but it was no longer the hopeless fear of before. Now it had been tempered into vigilance, into a fighting spirit. She knew she was not alone. Beside her was always Eros. His love and strength would be her greatest motivation. Together they stepped into the dark alley, leaving behind the faint light of where they had stood. Ahead lay darkness, challenges, but also hope, the opportunity for them to prove their love and sacrifice. The real life-or-death battle had only just begun. Passing through a gate that seemed to be made of randomly pieced-together shards of broken mirrors, Psyche and Eros found themselves in a completely different space. The dark alleys of the Saigon slum seemed to have vanished, replaced by a bizarre labyrinth where towering walls were formed from hazy images that constantly shifted and morphed. The dim light, sometimes bright, sometimes faint, further increased the unpredictability and the feeling of unease. Psyche looked around in bewilderment, trying to get her bearings. The walls didn't seem fixed. They swayed, undulated, and sometimes even disappeared and reappeared in a different location. "The illusion labyrinth," Eros explained, his voice a bit serious. "This place will test your mind and your faith. What you see may not be real." As soon as Eros finished speaking, one of the walls in front of Psyche suddenly dissolved, revealing a heartbreakingly familiar scene. It was an image of her cruel sisters, standing and laughing mockingly, pointing at her. The harsh words, the taunts they had once planted in her heart, echoed in the space. "Fool, you think you deserve a god? He'll abandon you soon enough." Psyche's heart clenched. Even though she had tried to forget those words, deep down, she still carried the fear of being abandoned, the fear of not being worthy of Eros's love. The images and sounds became more vivid, as if her sisters were actually standing before her, sowing doubt and self-doubt. "Don't believe what you see," Eros's voice rang out beside her, pulling her back to reality. He took her hand firmly, his steadfast gaze meeting hers. "This is just an illusion. You are stronger than what they say, and you deserve my love." Eros's words were like a beacon in the darkness, dispelling the phantoms in Psyche's mind. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her reason intact. She knew those words were just a product of the labyrinth, they weren't real. With a little effort, the image of her sisters faded and then disappeared completely. But the labyrinth didn't let her go easily. Just a few steps later, another illusion appeared. This time, she saw herself standing alone in an empty, cold room. No one was around, not a sound. A feeling of loneliness, of emptiness, enveloped her, evoking her deepest fear, a circumflex Eros, the fear of being left alone, the fear of being single forever. In that moment, Psyche felt her heart stop. She had always longed for love, longed for a family. The thought of having to live alone with no one by her side made her feel desperate. Tears welled up, and she raised her hands to cover her face. "Eros, where are you?" Her voice faltered in the silent space. There was no answer. The terrifying silence enveloped her, further increasing her feeling of isolation. Psyche began to panic. Could it be that her sister's words were true? Had Eros really left her? Just then a familiar voice echoed in her mind, warm and gentle as a spring breeze. "You are never alone, Psyche. I am always by your side in your heart." It was Eros's voice. Even though she couldn't see him, Psyche could still feel his presence, like an invisible thread connecting their two hearts. Her faith in Eros's love surged within her, dispelling the darkness of loneliness. She raised her head, taking a deep breath. "I know you're here," she whispered, her voice regaining its firmness. "I believe you." As soon as she finished speaking, the illusionary wall in front of her trembled and then vanished, revealing a new path. Psyche knew she had overcome another challenge, not with physical strength, but with the strength of her reason, her resilience, and above all, her faith in herself and Eros's love. And so, Psyche continued to wander through the illusion labyrinth, facing one illusion after another. At times, she saw herself failing in previous trials, being mocked and scorned by the other gods. The fear of failure, the fear of not meeting expectations, surrounded her. But each time she remembered what she had been through, remembered the perseverance and determination she had shown. She told herself that past failures were just stepping stones to future success. Eros was always by her side, although sometimes he couldn't directly intervene in the illusions Psyche had to face. but his voice and presence were always a great source of encouragement. He reminded her of her inner strength, of the undying love they had for each other. He was not only her lover, but also her companion, her guide leading her through the difficulties. Sometimes Eros himself had to face his own illusions. He saw Psyche disappear, vanish into nothingness, or be captured by dark forces. The fear of losing the one he loved made his heart clench. But he also trusted Psyche in the strength she had accumulated. He knew she wouldn't give up easily. In one moment, Psyche saw a particularly painful illusion. She saw Eros severely injured, lying motionless on the ground, surrounded by dark shadows. Extreme fear surged within her. She rushed towards him, trying to protect him from the dark forces. "Eros, no!" she cried out, tears streaming down her face. But when she touched him, the image dissolved. Eros was still there beside her, unharmed and strong. He hugged her tightly, stroking her hair. "See, it was just an illusion," he whispered. "They will try to exploit our deepest fears, but we can't let them win." Psyche rested her head against Eros's chest, feeling his strong heartbeat. She knew he was right. She had to be strong not only for herself, but also for him, for their love. After a long, seemingly endless time, when Psyche had faced and overcome countless illusions, the labyrinth began to shake. The hazy walls gradually became transparent, then vanished completely. Psyche and Eros found themselves standing back in the dark slum of Saigon, but the space around them had changed slightly. A small path appeared before them, like an invitation for them to continue their journey. Psyche breathed a sigh of relief, feeling exhausted but also proud. She had overcome the first challenge, not with magical power, but with the strength of her mind, her resilience, and above all, her faith in herself and Eros's love. "You did very well," Eros smiled, his eyes filled with affection as he looked at her. "I knew you could do it." Psyche leaned against Eros's shoulder, feeling the warmth and security he provided. "But there are still many more challenges ahead, aren't there?" "That's right," Eros replied. "But we will face them together, and you have proven to me that my mortal girl is not weak at all." They held hands, continuing to walk along the path towards the next challenges awaiting them in this dangerous slum. The atmosphere remained gloomy and tense, but in the hearts of Psyche and Eros, the flame of love and determination burned brightly, guiding them through every difficulty. The path led Psyche and Eros to an even more desolate and terrifying scene. Before them lay a wide canal, its water pitch black, as thick as tar, emitting a foul, fishy odor. Garbage, dead animal carcasses, and unidentified waste floated on the surface. This was not the mythical river Styx with its boats carrying souls, but a stark, polluted version of a deadly waterway in the heart of the city. "This is the river of the dead," Psyche shuddered, looking at the water with disgust. Eros nodded, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "A place containing resentful souls, those who departed with lingering regrets and hatred. Their bitterness is as thick as the fog that covers this place." As Psyche and Eros approached the canal bank, they began to hear moans, cries, and curses echoing from beneath the water's surface. Faint, dark shapes lurked beneath the surface, sometimes rising and then disappearing again, like invisible hands trying to drag them down into the abyss. "We have to cross this river," Eros said, his voice firm. "But there's no boat, no bridge. The only way is with our love." Psyche looked at Eros with doubt. "Love can help us cross this river. Only true love, sacrifice, forgiveness, and compassion can dispel the bitterness and help us safely reach the other side," Eros explained. "These souls are trapped by their own negative emotions. Our love can bring them peace." They held hands, standing before the black canal bank. There was no clear path, only the cold water and the terrifying moans. "What do you think we should do?" Psyche asked. "We will step into the water," Eros replied. "Hold my hand tightly and focus on the love we have for each other. Let's send loving and forgiving thoughts to the suffering souls." Psyche took a deep breath, trying to dispel the fear rising within her. She trusted Eros, trusted the power of their love. Together, they stepped into the cold water. As soon as their feet touched the surface, the moans around them became more intense. The dark shapes beneath the canal began to rise, reaching out with their gaunt arms towards them, trying to pull them down. A cold, slimy feeling enveloped Psyche, filling her with dread. "Don't be afraid," Eros whispered, squeezing her hand tightly. "Remember what I said, our love is stronger than bitterness." Together, they moved forward, trying to keep their spirits up. Psyche closed her eyes, focusing on the image of Eros in her mind. She recalled happy moments, loving promises, the sacrifices they had made for each other. She sent loving and forgiving thoughts to the suffering souls, praying for their release. Strangely, as Psyche's loving thoughts spread, the dark shapes around them seemed to calm down. The moans gradually subsided, replaced by soft sighs of relief. Some of the dark shapes even retreated, as if the warm light of love was causing them to dissipate. However, the river was still very wide, and the bitterness was still very strong in the deeper areas. Psyche and Eros continued to walk, sometimes facing strong undercurrents and dangerous whirlpools. In one moment, a resentful spirit, the form of a gaunt woman with disheveled hair, rose up right in front of Psyche. Her eyes were bloodshot, filled with hatred. She raised her hands, trying to claw at Psyche. Psyche startled, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she looked directly into the woman's suffering eyes, and an overwhelming feeling of pity welled up within her. She realized this hatred stemmed from extreme suffering. "I'm sorry for what you had to endure," Psyche said, her voice sincere and full of compassion. "I pray that you will soon find peace." Psyche's words, along with the sincerity in her eyes, seemed to touch the frozen heart of the resentful spirit. The woman's face showed a hint of surprise, and then the hatred gradually faded, replaced by a deep sadness. She nodded slightly, then slowly sank back into the black water. Eros looked at Psyche with admiration. "You did it, Psyche. Your compassion touched even the most hardened hearts." They continued their journey, facing many other resentful spirits. Some screamed, trying to attack them, but others simply looked at them silently with sorrow. Psyche and Eros always responded with love, forgiveness, and compassion. They understood that these souls were not enemies, but victims of past tragedies. In the middle of the river, a greater challenge appeared. A huge whirlpool formed before them, terrifying roars echoing through the space. The dark shapes beneath the water became more ferocious, merging into bizarre figures, trying to drown Psyche and Eros. "Hold on tight to me," Eros shouted, trying to use his divine power to resist the whirlpool. But the power of bitterness was too great. It engulfed them both, pulling them deeper down. In that dangerous moment, Psyche realized that love alone was not enough. They needed a greater sacrifice, an act showing their willingness to give up themselves for the other. Without hesitation, Psyche forcefully pushed Eros out of the whirlpool, using her own body to shield him from the terrible suction. She felt the pain of being crushed by the swirling water, but in her heart she had no regrets. "Psyche, no!" Eros shouted, trying to rush back towards her. "Keep going, Eros," Psyche yelled back, her voice weakening. "I believe you will complete the task. Live happily, my love." With that, Psyche sank completely into the black water, swept away by the violent whirlpool. Eros stood frozen, watching the spot where Psyche had just disappeared. His heart felt like it had been squeezed by someone's hand. Grief and despair surged within him. He had almost lost the girl he loved once again. But then a thought flashed through his mind. Psyche had sacrificed herself to save him. He couldn't let her down. He had to continue, had to overcome this challenge, not just for himself, but for Psyche. With a cry full of pain and determination, Eros gathered all his divine power, fighting against the whirlpool. He swam forward relentlessly, with the faint hope that Psyche was still alive. Strangely, as Eros showed his determination and intense love, the whirlpool seemed to calm down. The dark shapes around him gradually dissipated. A faint light began to appear ahead, like a sign of hope. After a difficult and painful journey, Eros finally reached the other side of the canal. He collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, but his eyes never stopped searching for Psyche's figure. And then he saw her. Psyche was lying motionless on the black sand, her body soaked and cold. Eros rushed to her side, holding her in his arms. "Psyche, are you all right? Wake up!" he called to her, his voice filled with anxiety. After a few breathless moments, Psyche slowly opened her eyes. She looked at Eros, a weak smile appearing on her lips. I'm fine," she whispered. "I knew you would save me." Eros held her tighter, tears falling onto her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I couldn't protect you." "It's not your fault," Psyche said. "I did what I had to do. Our love is stronger than death, isn't it?" They looked at each other, their eyes filled with all the love, sacrifice, and compassion they had experienced. They had crossed the river of the dead not with magic or power, but with their true love and the noble sacrifice they made for each other. After resting for a while, regaining their strength on the bank of the Black Canal, Psyche and Eros continued their journey. The path led them deeper into the dark slum. The atmosphere became more suffocating and heavy, as if an invisible pressure was weighing down on them. The moans of the resentful souls still echoed somewhere, but now they carried a more threatening tone. Suddenly, the darkness around them began to thicken, twisting into bizarre shapes. A bone-chilling cold spread, making Psyche and Eros feel as if thousands of eyes were watching them from the shadows. And then, from the deepest darkness of a dilapidated alley, a colossal figure slowly emerged. It had no fixed form, but was a mass of blackness, sparkling with fiery red lights like embers. Smaller shadows surrounded it, like arms reaching out, ready to devour everything. This was the Shadow Self, the dark force hidden deep within the souls of the gods, now fully manifested. It carried within it all the ambitions, selfishness, jealousy, and other dark aspects that the gods tried to conceal. "So you have finally arrived," a hoarse, malicious voice echoed from the mass of darkness. The voice sounded like thousands of voices merging together, creating a terrifying sound. "You think a mortal love can conquer this eternal darkness? How ridiculous!" Eros tightened his grip on Psyche's hand, standing protectively in front of her. His golden wings fluttered slightly, ready for battle. "We will prove to you that love is stronger than any darkness." The Shadow Self sneered, a chilling sound echoing through the space. "Are you still delusional, Eros? Even you have been tempted by darkness. Ambition for power, the arrogance of a god. All lie within you, and you too, mortal girl. Fear, self-doubt, jealousy. They are an inseparable part of your human nature." The words of the Shadow Self were like venomous arrows piercing the hearts of Psyche and Eros. Memories of past mistakes, moments of weakness, resurfaced clearly in their minds. Psyche remembered the times she had doubted Eros, the moments she felt insecure because she was just a mortal. Eros remembered the times he had been arrogant, looked down on others, and even the times he had been unreasonably jealous. The Shadow Self seemed to read their thoughts. "That's right. That is your true nature. You cannot escape the darkness within yourselves, and I am the embodiment of that darkness." With that, the colossal mass of darkness lunged towards Psyche and Eros, the shadows around it reaching out like sharp claws. "We can't let it sow doubt in our hearts," Eros said quickly, pushing Psyche aside as a shadow flashed past where they had just stood. "We have to fight it not just with power, but with the truth of our love." Psyche nodded, regaining her composure. She knew the Shadow Self was trying to exploit their weaknesses, their deepest fears and doubts, but they couldn't let it succeed. Together, they charged into battle. Eros used his divine power, firing arrows of light at the mass of darkness. But the arrows seemed to pass right through it without causing any significant damage. The Shadow Self retaliated with intense waves of darkness, attacking Psyche and Eros from all sides. They had to constantly dodge and defend, trying not to be touched by the shadows. While fighting, Psyche realized something. The Shadow Self was not only attacking them with power, but also with words, with toxic whispers, trying to sow discord and doubt in their relationship. "You think he truly loves you, mortal girl?" the hoarse voice echoed in Psyche's ear. "He's just using your naivety to escape the responsibilities of a god." At the same time, Eros also heard similar whispers. "She's just a weak mortal. You deserve a goddess, Eros. Why are you wasting your time with her?" Those words made Psyche and Eros waver. Old doubts resurfaced, gnawing at their faith. "Don't listen to it," Eros shouted at Psyche, trying to dispel the toxic words. "We know the truth about our love." Psyche nodded, trying to focus on Eros. She remembered everything they had been through together, the difficulties they had overcome, the sacrifices they had made for each other. Their love was real, it was stronger than any lie. But the Shadow Self was growing stronger. It seemed to absorb their doubts and fears, turning them into its own power. The mass of darkness expanded, the shadows around it becoming more ferocious and unpredictable. Psyche and Eros realized they couldn't defeat the Shadow Self with ordinary power alone. They had to fight it from within, confront their own dark sides, and overcome them. In a moment, Psyche stopped, closing her eyes. She took a deep breath, trying to look deep into her soul. She realized that the Shadow Self was not an external enemy, but a part of herself, of everyone. It was selfish ambitions, irrational fears, petty jealousies. But she also realized that beside the darkness there was always light. She had Eros's love, compassion, perseverance, and even the troll side that had helped her overcome so many difficulties. She was no longer the weak girl she once was. Opening her eyes, Psyche's gaze became more determined than ever. She looked at Eros, and he looked back at her, both understanding each other's intentions. They no longer tried to fight the shadow self with power. Instead, they stood side by side, holding hands tightly, and together they faced the darkness. "We do not deny the existence of darkness," Psyche said, her voice echoing in the silent space. "But we will not let it control us. We choose light, we choose love." Eros continued, "Darkness may be powerful, but the light of love is even stronger. It can dispel all shadows." As they spoke those words, a brilliant light began to emanate from the hearts of Psyche and Eros. The light spread around them, engulfing the shadow self. The mass of darkness began to tremble, the shadows around it moaned and then dissipated. The shadow self screamed in pain, its hoarse voice filled with despair. "Number, it's impossible, you cannot defeat me." But the light of love grew stronger and stronger, burning away the darkness, turning it to ashes. Finally, the shadow self completely vanished, leaving behind a clear and peaceful space. Psyche and Eros still stood there, holding hands tightly, a gentle light surrounding them. They had won, not with supernatural power, but with the strength of their growth, by overcoming their egos and uniting the power of their love. Throughout the arduous journey, Psyche had proven that she was not just a weak mortal girl. Her sharp intelligence had repeatedly helped them escape dangerous situations. In the illusion labyrinth, when faced with her deepest fears, it was her reason and analytical skills that helped her recognize the false nature of the illusions. She did not let emotions overwhelm her, but always tried to find the logic behind the mind's tricks. Psyche's troll nature was also a powerful weapon. She was not afraid to face challenges with a humorous attitude, sometimes even with a hint of sarcasm. When the harsh words of the illusionary sisters echoed in her ears, instead of giving in, she responded with witty remarks, silencing the ghosts in her mind. Her optimism and ability to find joy in difficult circumstances helped her maintain her spirit and not give up. And above all, it was her intense love for Eros that became Psyche's endless source of strength. That love was not only the motivation for her to overcome every challenge, but also the guiding light, helping her find her way out of the darkest labyrinths. When facing the river of the dead, it was love and compassion that helped her feel and soothe the pain of the resentful souls. The act of sacrificing herself to save Eros was the clearest proof of her boundless love. She had proven that a truly loving heart can be stronger than any magic or divine power. Mortal girl Psyche had truly carried the team, not only because she overcame difficult challenges, but also because she did so with the best qualities of her humanity. Eros had also undergone a significant change throughout this journey. No longer as clumsy and impulsive as before, he had become a reliable companion, always by Psyche's side, supporting her wholeheartedly. He shared his divine power with her, giving her more confidence to face the challenges. In the illusion labyrinth, even though he couldn't directly resolve Psyche's illusions, Eros was always there, encouraging her and reminding her of the truth. His warm voice and reassuring words were a great source of mental strength for Psyche. When crossing the river of the dead, Eros not only faced the dangers with Psyche, but also learned how to express love more deeply. He had witnessed Psyche's noble sacrifice and felt the intense love she had for him. The worry and pain when he thought he had lost Psyche showed him how important she was. He fought with all his might to save her, showing the maturity and responsibility of a lover. In the battle with the shadow self, Eros worked in perfect harmony with Psyche. He no longer acted alone but always cared about her safety and emotions. He protected her from dangerous attacks while also working with her to find a way to deal with the enemy. Their love had truly sublimated in the difficulties, becoming a unified force that nothing could break. Eros had proven that true love is not just sweet words, but also care, protection, and a willingness to sacrifice for the one you love. The moment Psyche sacrificed herself to save Eros by the river of the dead was truly a breathtaking moment. When the violent whirlpool engulfed them both, and Psyche realized that only one could escape, she did not hesitate to push Eros away, accepting being dragged down by the water. "Keep going, Eros. I believe you will complete the task. Live happily, my love." Her last words were choked with the sound of the swirling water, but still full of love and faith. Eros had witnessed it all, grief and despair surging within him like violent waves. He had almost lost Psyche, the girl he loved more than himself. In that moment, time seemed to stand still, with only Eros's heart-wrenching cry echoing in the gloomy space. But then, like a ray of light flashing in the dark night, Eros remembered Psyche's words. She believed in him, she wanted him to continue. He couldn't let her down. With a steadfast will, Eros fought the whirlpool, pouring all his strength into reaching the other side with the faint hope that Psyche was still alive. When he saw Psyche lying motionless on the black sand, Eros's heart almost stopped. He rushed to her side, holding her cold body tightly in his arms, calling her name in vain. Hot tears fell onto Psyche's pale face. But love once again proved its extraordinary power. After moments that seemed like eternity, Psyche slowly opened her eyes. She looked at Eros, and although her body was weak, she still managed a smile. I'm fine," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I knew you would save me." Eros held her tighter, speechless. Joy and gratitude welled up within him. He had almost lost her, but Psyche's love and sacrifice had brought her back. In that moving moment, even though the situation was still tense, Psyche didn't forget to be trollish. She frowned slightly, her voice weak but still playful. "But you remember, if anything happens to me, you have to avenge me. Got it, you silly god." Eros laughed through his sobs, holding her even tighter. "I promise, my Psyche, I will avenge you, and then we will live happily ever after together." The breathtaking moment had passed, but it had etched a lesson about love and sacrifice into the hearts of Psyche and Eros, a testament to the fact that their love was stronger than life and death. After defeating the shadow self, Psyche and Eros thought all the challenges were over. But the underworld version of Saigon's slum was not ready to let them go. As they embraced, sighing with relief, suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shook violently. From the huge piles of garbage around them, bizarre figures began to emerge. They were grotesque creatures, formed from trash, waste, and even fragments of broken dreams. They had no fixed shape, but were a chaotic mixture of discarded and forgotten things. "What is this?" Psyche asked in astonishment. "Perhaps this is the real final boss," Eros shrugged, his face helpless but still unable to hide his humor. "After so many intense mental battles, in the end, it's still a boss fight with no logic." The garbage creatures lunged towards Psyche and Eros, attacking chaotically, spraying foul-smelling liquids, and throwing sharp pieces of metal at them. "Let's fight, my love," Eros shouted, waving his hand to create a whirlwind of light that swept away a group of monsters. Psyche was not to be outdone. She used her intelligence and troll nature to deal with these strange enemies. She picked up a large trash can lid as a shield, while throwing broken bottles back at the monsters. "Honey, that little one seems to be trying to bite your butt," Psyche shouted while fighting. "You're too worried about my butt," Eros dodged while replying with an affectionate tease. The battle unfolded in a chaotic and humorous manner. Eros's magic mixed with Psyche's unexpected weapons, creating an unprecedented, messy scene. The garbage monsters roared, waving their bizarre limbs, but they couldn't touch Psyche and Eros. Finally, after a while of fighting and flirting, Psyche and Eros realized that these creatures didn't really have any special power. They were just products of chaos and negativity. "We just need to show them love and positivity, that's enough," Psyche said, smiling. Together, they held hands, closed their eyes, and focused on the love they had for each other. A warm and brilliant light enveloped them, spreading all around. Strangely, when the light of love touched the garbage creatures, they began to disintegrate, turning into tiny dust particles and then disappearing into the air. The dark slum seemed to brighten up as well, the piles of garbage gradually disappearing, giving way to a more normal scene, though still a bit desolate. Psyche and Eros opened their eyes, smiling at each other. They had won not through extraordinary power, but thanks to luck and their unbeatable love. The arduous journey had finally come to an end. Psyche, from a weak mortal girl, had truly become a goddess, not through magic, but through her courage, intelligence, troll, nature, and true love. Beside her, Eros had become a reliable companion, someone who always loved, protected, and supported her unconditionally. Their love had overcome all challenges, proving that it was stronger than both divinity and darkness. As the light gradually faded, Psyche and Eros looked at each other, a relieved smile appearing on both their lips. The underworld version of Saigon's slum seemed to have shed its dark shell. The alleys were still there, the dilapidated buildings still stood, but they no longer had the gloomy, lifeless look they had before. A few faint rays of sunlight had begun to break through the fog, shining down on the puddles, creating shimmering streaks of light. The stench had also subsided, replaced by the smell of damp earth after a rain shower. They both sat down on an old step, leaning against each other, feeling the peace after the intense battles. Their bodies were tired, but their hearts were filled with joy and satisfaction. They had overcome the final challenges together, proving the power of love and sacrifice. "I think we did it," Psyche said softly, her voice still a little hoarse. Eros squeezed her hand gently. "We did it, my Psyche, you did it. You truly are a heroine." Psyche smiled, resting her head on Eros's shoulder. "I'm just a mortal girl who's a bit too good at carrying the team." They both laughed, the soft laughter echoing in the quiet space. They remembered the difficult moments they had been through, the fears they had faced, and the victories they had won. From the illusion labyrinth full of fears to the deadly river with resentful souls, and finally the battle with the shadow self and the strange garbage monsters, each challenge was a lesson, a step forward in their love journey. "I once thought you couldn't overcome these challenges," Eros confessed, his voice softening. "You were just a mortal, weak and vulnerable, but you proved me wrong. You are stronger than any god I have ever known." Psyche raised her head, looking into Eros's eyes. "My strength comes from your love, Eros. You have always believed in me, encouraged me, and given me the strength to face every difficulty. Without you, I wouldn't have been able to do this." Eros held Psyche tighter. "We did it together, my love. Our love conquered everything." The question posed in this chapter is, Psyche carries the team. Mortal girl becomes goddess. After everything that had happened, had Psyche truly become a goddess? Perhaps not literally, she was still a mortal. But in Eros's heart and in the eyes of all who had witnessed her journey, Psyche had truly become a goddess in her own way. Her strength did not come from magical powers, but from her courage, intelligence, perseverance, compassion, and boundless love. She had carried the team, not only because she overcame difficult challenges, but also because she did so with the best qualities of her humanity. Looking towards the horizon, where the sun's rays were gradually dispelling the fog, Psyche and Eros knew that their journey was not over. They would still have to face many other challenges in the future. But now, they had a firm belief in the power of their love, a bond that nothing could break. They would continue together, facing every difficulty with open hearts and undying love. "Where will we go next?" Psyche asked, resting her head on Eros's shoulder. Eros smiled softly. "We will go home, my Psyche. We will return to Olympus, and we will be together forever." Psyche nodded gently, her heart filled with happiness. She didn't need to become a goddess to be with Eros. Their love was enough to overcome all obstacles, all prejudices. She was Psyche, the mortal girl who had conquered the heart of a god, and their love would forever be a legend. As they both stood up, holding hands and walking under the morning sunlight, they left behind the underworld version of Saigon's slum, carrying with them precious lessons about faith, sacrifice, and the unparalleled power of love. They had proven that, whether god or mortal, true love is always the greatest magic, capable of conquering all darkness and bringing light to life.